This episode is sponsored by Magic Mind.
When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back. It's the HTML All Things Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Curran. And in this episode, working title, but the current title is How to Burn Out Your Web Developer. So what if I told you that this episode is going to be kind of crazy? I'm going to explain why actually during the episode, but we're going to bring up some World War II stuff. We're going to bring in the CIA. We're going to bring in some sabotage. We're going to talk about dystopian stuff. And all this kind of stems from a documentary. So stick with us if you're interested in something like that, because it sounds crazy, but I thought we would do an episode on this after I discovered it. So if all that sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And remember, we have up to 20% off your Scrimba subscription for new accounts. You can check out our affiliate link in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. So I have just one heck of a document here. Mike kind of opened this up. Like you just opened it up today, I think, Mike. And there's like a big old rough note section. Thankfully, I can collapse it because it's really big. And then I have a more concise and put together show note section that I can actually refer to. But just to give you an idea on the structure of the episode, I'm going to throw a bunch of facts at you. Maybe Mike will chime in here and there. But we're going to throw a bunch of facts at you. I'm going to throw a bunch of things that come up. And these all stem from a documentary, which again, I'll explain during the episode. And then we're going to kind of have a debate, a discussion at the end based on what we said. And I'll put in some explainers as I go through the episode. So we're going to dive in. This is already getting crazy, but we're going to go back to World War II right now. This is a tech podcast. We're going back to World War II. So back in World War II, a manual was written by the Office of Strategic Services. This is the predecessor of the CIA for citizens and resistance fighters of Nazi-occupied territory. And this manual was titled The Simple Sabotage Field Manual. And it offered instructions on how to grind the German war machine to a halt by sabotaging their workplaces. Now you're going to say, Matt, like, why are you bringing this up? Like, are you going to bring up like a special tech device? Were they web developing in World War II? No, that's not the case here. There are some points in this manual that are obviously about sabotage. I mean, it's called the Simple Sabotage Field Manual. Then why is it that many of these points describe perfectly what the average day at the office entails? So I got a quote here. Interrupt work as often as possible. Now, don't you think that it's difficult to focus in the office sometimes? People are always tapping you on the shoulder. If you're working from home, you're getting slacks. Even if you're working in the office, people are slacking you. They're sending you Teams. They're sending you emails. Interrupt work as much as possible. That's interesting. Here's another. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm going to jump right in the first thing. I'm going to jump right in. Interrupt work as much as possible. Have you noticed the shift and the trend to go to open offices where you have just desks with no walls? And like, that's the trendy thing to do. I was at an office recently and it was an open office. It was a big one. It was like a hybrid office. So like there wasn't a lot of people there. So it was fine. But I just tried to picture like the office full. And there's like, every floor had like hundreds of desks. I can't imagine being productive in that environment. I can't imagine. I was like, okay, so you have meeting rooms for meetings and stuff like that, but people are still going to talk. Like that's the whole point of an office. People are going to go and talk to each other near their desks. How are you supposed to work? How are you supposed to work with constant distraction all over the place? So this first point, it's even worse now because like before cubicles suck. Sure. But at least you had some space around you. You had a buffer. There's no more space anymore.
And I'm almost certain we've heard, because like this was a trend, say like right before COVID and like in the years prior to that, maybe 5-6 years, something like that. and it was like, oh, this is for collaboration and stuff. And then there were like a lot of studies I remember coming out that had indicated, hey, this is actually not a good idea. This is something that we should not be doing. This is something that we absolutely, should be holding back on. And then it was just like, no, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're going to do it, against the idea that, hey, don't you want your workers to be more efficient? It's kind of strange. I got another strange one for you here. This is right from the book, right from the quote, a quote from the book. Arrange meetings when there is more important work to be done. How many of us contend with endless meetings? People are like, oh, we got to have a meeting for that. We got to have a meeting for that. If you want to do this, we have to have a meeting. It's part of our systems now. Now, meetings are important. I mean, especially as a contractor, as a freelancer over here, like myself, I'm talking. I mean, I need to have a meeting with you to know what you need. So there are times absolutely when productivity needs to be done, or productivity calls for a meeting, and it is productive to have the meeting so that I can then be productive alone, usually afterwards, building out the slider or the website or the whatever it is the person has asked for. Well, what if I told you, I just mentioned systems and all this stuff. What if I told you another quote from this book is multiply paperwork? So think about, maybe it was you, maybe it's a friend, maybe whomever. How many forms do you fill out that nobody will ever read? How many friends do you have that sit in an office and fill out bureaucratic forms that no one is ever going to read? How many friends do you have that enforce bureaucracy that doesn't seem to actually help anything? It doesn't seem to actually push anything forward. Bureaucracy is good in some cases, 100%. Sometimes you need clear-cut forms. You need things to be very precise, especially when dealing with a volume of people. You need to have that bureaucracy where it's like everybody has to fill in this form and I must have this information in order to proceed. That makes sense. But bureaucracy can quickly get out of control. Multiply paperwork. Interesting one. How about this? All decisions should be taken to a committee. So you're having meetings left, right, and center. You're filling out forms left, right, and center. But are any of those meetings actually making any decisions? Do you need to wait for a bigger meeting down the road? Do you need to wait for a committee to make a decision? In many offices, the answer is yes. A bunch of the people, if you will, the workers and the lead hands, maybe even the manager will have a meeting and they'll have it, maybe multiple meetings. But then they're like, okay, we've decided that we need $100 million budget. Well, the manager doesn't decide that. He's got to go to the other guy. He's maybe got to go to a director. Maybe there's a senior director. Maybe there's this. Maybe there's that. Maybe there's the CEO, depending on how big the company is and how it's structured. And then that committee decides, okay, we'll do this. Okay, we'll do that. Now, this one's kind of weird. This next one, hold speeches and bring up irrelevant issues. How many times in the office have you been brought into some sort of town hall? Hey, we're going to have a town hall. We're going to have a comedian there. Hey, we're going to have a town hall. We're going to talk about how great we're doing. Hey, we're going to have a town hall. We're going to talk about the marketplace and all this. Meanwhile, your team is sinking. Maybe your team is being laid off and you're like going to be gone in a month. And it's like, I'm going to these town halls and they're not bringing up the concerns of the company. I mean, if a company is like not doing too well, they may have a town hall to talk about how great the market's doing. Well, fantastic. But how do we fit into the script of the market? How do we make our impression in the market? And it's like, well, now your spirits are up, right? And it's kind of like, well, if you're a person that sees through this stuff, no, at least I wouldn't. If I'm brought to a thing where it's like, let's have a sing and dance. And I'm like, hang on, am I going to be laid off? Let's have a sing and dance. Sing and dance, Matt. It's like sing and dance with my flip of paper that says I'm laid off. Like, what am I doing here? Right? So irrelevant issues. And then this is the last quote from the book here. 3 people have to approve anything when 1 would be enough. This one probably hits home for a lot of people. How many times have you been like, hey, I want to change this slider? Like, okay, great. Well, I want to change the slider. I'm not the decision maker. I got to go to my contact at the company, especially as a freelancer. That contact goes, well, I got to talk to my manager. Manager goes, well, I got to talk to marketing. And this is already, now we're getting 2-3 approvals, and it's really leaning up against that committee quote that I said earlier too, where it's like, oh, now we got these 3 people. These 3 people have to vote, discuss, have a conversation about it. Then they bring it back to you, back and forth, when at the end of the day, that slider change is not going to be big. That slider change is not going to completely revolutionize the site. It's not going to absolutely tank the site. It's just like, hey man, I'm going to put this poster up. And it was just like, do we want the person kicking the soccer ball to the left or to the right? And we need to have like a committee. We need to have 3 approvals to get that thing out the door. Now you may say, Matt, like where's all this coming from? And Mike and I had this conversation before the episode, and it's like, hey, like, Matt, are you getting into conspiracy theories? Are you getting into all this? No, that's not what's happening here. So I'll explain the backstory here. A few nights ago, I decided that I wanted to watch a documentary. So I just went into YouTube and I just typed in documentary, something like that. And a couple of different documentaries showed up. First one was actually How to Be a Billionaire. And this is kind of like an uplifting look at a handful of billionaires and how they made their fortunes and how they all are like work differently and what do they all do that's common. And it ultimately kind of boiled down to, people that have a dream and execute it no matter what the people around them saying. And, failure is an option, but the overall dream survives and you keep pushing and pushing and pushing. So they don't always succeed the first time, but they keep pushing and pushing and pushing because failure is only temporary and just keep going. So this is kind of an uplifting documentary. I will link that in the show notes. But then we get to this other one that was quite literally second in the list here, which is titled Burnout, When Does Work Start Feeling Pointless? And this is by DW Documentary. This is also on YouTube, which I will link in the show notes. And this is a less uplifting look at the workplaces that many of us experience. But it is an interesting deep dive into what makes people and corporations tick. So this documentary is where virtually all the facts and information in this episode come from. I'm going to throw a bunch of stats at you during the episode sprinkled in. I'm not just going to give you a data sheet, but there's going to be a lot of stats kind of thrown in. So if you're like, hey, is that a few years old or whatever, it's from the documentary. So it's from whatever information source that they have. And again, I will link that documentary in the actual show notes on htmlallthethings.com. Now, while I've been kind of working away, doing all this stuff, I have actually been trying out some Magic Minds. That's right. I have in my hands here my pack of 90 gummies. This is a pack of 90 mental performance gummies. I'm looking at it right now. Right on the front cover, it says it's for clear focus, calm mind, and less stress. This is the Magic Mind shots that you all know and love. I've introduced you to them before. I've talked about them before. But these things have no caffeine in them. These things are for kids. They're for adults. They have a clear age chart on the back and how many you should be taking. So make sure you follow the directions, of course. But these things have been great for me. So lately, I've been really, really busy. I have a deadline coming up next week. I have some personal stuff going on, not serious, good personal stuff going on this weekend where I'm kind of going out of town for a day. And so I need to get ready and get all my work done and stuff like that. And so I've been like really kind of hitting the books hard, but I'm no longer in school. I'm really hitting the keyboard, I guess, hard, getting my work done. And I've been quickly grabbing these. Now the shots are great. I can do the same thing where I wake up, have a coffee really quick, have that coffee, then of course come back, or have that coffee, then quickly come back to my shelf, have the shot, and then move on. What I've been doing is while my coffee is actually brewing, I actually just pop my gummies. I just go in, quickly have them, and then I'm already Magic Mind up, have my coffee right after, and then I can immediately go hit the keyboard hard and do that. These are the shots in gummy form, so they have virtually all the same ingredients that you would normally expect out of Magic Mind, but no caffeine. So it has their matcha in there. It'll help you focus. You're not getting the jitters. You're not getting any of that kind of ugly stuff. But these are just a nice little addition. And golf season is coming up. I mentioned this last time. It's not quite here. There's still snow on the ground here, but I know that these Magic Mind gummies are going to be great for my golf bag. The shots are great, but I would, these are going to be nice. So just grab maybe a handful of them, toss them in a little Ziploc bag because this is a large bag, again, of 90 gummies. And I'm going to toss these in my golf bag, and then I just have them. So it's like, oh shoot, I ran out the door just to end up, making my tea time, miss my Magic Mind. I'll have it right in the bag. No big deal. That's great with the shots, but it's going to be really great with the gummies because I'm going to be able to fit a lot of gummies in a Ziploc bag. Now, if you're interested in getting your hands on these things, giving them a try, we have up to 25% off using our affiliate link. That's magicmind.com/HTMLGM, or you can alternatively use the promo code HTML25. Remember, this is a resealable bag of 90 gummies. It's the Magic Mind shots in gummy form, but if you do not like caffeine, you don't have to worry because these things do not have caffeine in them. Go check it out. So there was something in this documentary that I thought was really interesting. And they mentioned this thing that kind of stuck with me. And it was just a random. So on the screen in this documentary, how they presented it was they had experts talking, of course. They had B-roll running, but they had like some text pop up on the screen here and there. And they said something like 100 years ago, modern office work was portrayed only in imagined dystopian futures. And so I was kind of thinking, I was like, you know what? Like, if depending on your office job, office work can be a bit dystopian. Like, you sit there, fill out these bureaucratic forms that no one's going to read, get it done fast. You're able to do 10 a day while you're doing 12 a day, get it done, right? That's the environment that some offices hold on to, they've created, and it's not great. But I mean, back like a little over 100 years ago, or a little under 100 years ago, excuse me, back in 1930, an economist named John Keynes predicted that we would be working a 15-hour work week by 2030. So in 5 years, Mike, we're going to be working 15-hour work week.
Well, I better be.
But here's the thing. Largely, our jobs today, right now, could be done in less than 8 hours a day. Now, that's not always the case. There's busy times, there's less busy times, and there's also different jobs. Like sometimes you're a service person, you got to be available for 8 hours a day. Obviously, a lot of these statements are sort of generalized, but instead of us allowing those that could work less, meaning they get the same amount of work done, they're still getting the work done, they're not just sitting around. But instead of letting them sort of leave the office in 4 hours, 5 hours, we created millions, and I do mean millions of administrative jobs. So back in Keynes' time, that's that philosopher I was just talking about, or rather that's that economist I was talking about, approximately 25% of jobs were administrative. As of the documentary, we're looking at approximately 75%. We created jobs like supervisory jobs, managerial jobs, clerical jobs. And you can think of the office almost like a big play, right? So everyone's there, and some people are like, they're boots on the ground. They're actually making the product that the company's selling. But there's all these other people, they're supervising their manager. They're being a manager. These people are running the numbers. These people are running statistics. These people are running analytics. And if you've ever worked in an office, a lot of the departments don't like each other. Heck, even if there's somebody from a different role in your team, sometimes they don't get along. So what do I mean by that? Well, maybe the developers, they may have like an accountant on board if what they're doing, if the project, let's say, that they're doing is extremely capital heavy. Like if you're like, man, I gotta like watch what they're doing, right? It's like every move that these developers are making right now is going to be $15 million, $10 million. We're going to take an accountant from the accounting team, remove them from the accounting team, and put them in the dev team for like, the year or whatever it is while they do this thing. Cause like we got to watch the dang money. And the developers might be like, like a bit of that stink eye. It's kind of like, don't really like that accountant. But can you say that? Not really. The entire office is kind of like a big play. Nobody's really able to be honest in that way. The employee can't be honest about their manager if they think they're an idiot. I mean, it's rude and this and that, but however, it's kind of like that manager's an idiot, but they're the manager, and like, who am I going to complain to? The manager? It's an issue. The manager, by his own right, his or her own right, can't treat the director poorly, because what if that manager eventually wants to be director? What if they just don't like each other? It's kind of like, you can't just say that, right? And so it's kind of like everybody's just sort of like put the smile on, and it's a bit like weird. It's kind of like a facade. It's almost like lying, but not lying. It's a little weird. Now I'm going to throw some statistics at you. 20% of workers worldwide are engaged. And when I say engaged, I mean engaged in their work. They're actually like, yes, I get to do this work, or like, woo, like this is actually providing something, and they're ready to go. 20%, 61% are not engaged. They're just kind of like, not great. Kind of see their work as kind of boring. They're not engaged by the work. 19% are so unhappy that they're actively working against their employer. They're miserable. They hate it. 19% is very close to 20%. And like 20% feels like just sort of like, I don't know, you in the human number system, it kind of feels like that point where it's like, if something's hitting 20%, we should pay attention to it. Like 10% feels insignificant, 15% feels insignificant. Once you hit 20, it's like, because if we double this, we're almost half. So 20% is where it's starting to feel pretty significant. And again, like, I don't know if these numbers have gone up or gone down, how they've adjusted since the documentary was filmed, but 19% working against your organization, not great.
So I have a lot to say on this one. Right now, we're in this phase of the workplace where we had almost like a golden era of work from home, everyone was remote, and I can almost guarantee that employee satisfaction was higher during the remote era of time. And now, after epic amounts of success over the last 5 years, all the stocks reaching their all-time highs, all companies recording record profits, essentially signifying that the workers at their companies have done a fantastic job at their jobs. We are going, no, 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 our productivity is bad, other than the evidence that it's good. We need to bring you all back home or back to the office. This is paramount to the success of our company. And no matter what you say, you're coming back to the office. So now we're reneging on a lot of agreements. A lot of contracts are being kind of ripped up because a lot of people signed contracts with remote work as part of the contract. And we're forcing workers back to the office. So that's one thing that's happening. The other thing that's happening is we're having these like CEOs that come in and are trying to restructure their companies in a way that they're seeing, hey, these employees are not bought in. Like they're not as bought in as I am, the CEO. So we need to redo the entire structure of the company so that employees can't just work 8 hours a day. They need to be back and working as much as we possibly can get out of them. Eric Schmidt, one of the co-founders of Google, recently put out that people get their most effective work when they're working 60 hours a week. So his philosophy is like, we're not getting enough out of our employees. Again, this is against the statistics that we have shown with record profits and all of the big Fortune 500 companies reporting massive, or Fortune 50 companies, I should say, reporting massive increases in productivity and profits. He's saying, no, we're not doing that. Everything we're doing is wrong. We need to grind our employees more. They need to have a more appetite for doing what we as CEOs do, which is obviously put in a ton of work. Now, there's a difference between a CEO or a company owner or a founder or management, even ownership management, I should say, like directors, and an employee. And the main difference is that they don't own the company. They're there to do the freaking job and make sure that your company continues to run, but they don't really own it. And yeah, you can say like they have their stock options. Well, they have their stock options. Those stock options most of the time mean diddly squat, and you're giving them peanuts in stock options. You can't compare a CEO's stock options to a random employee's stock options. That's not how it works. I don't care how you say it. Now, early companies like startups and stuff like that, there's a little bit of a difference there. The first like 60 employees or whatever can get some stock options, but those are all casino. Those are all gambling. Like you don't know what a stock option is worth in a company that hasn't gone public or has no way of exiting. So sure, you have a little bit more options, but they could more likely turn out to be zero. So are you really going to put in 60 hours a week for the chance of zero benefit other than the salary? So again, like there's a lot of contradicting things going on in the current office work environment that's being driven by the demand for workers going down. So because of the fact that all these companies have realized that they can lay off 20% of their workforce and still be somewhat productive, now there's a plethora of people looking for work and less jobs. So companies are obviously going to turn around and be like, well, now we're going to pay you less, work you more, bring you back into the office, give you less benefits, give you less perks in the office, obviously, treat you worse, fire you whenever we want. Like these are the trends that are happening. I'm not saying it out of like, oh, these are the worst case scenarios. This is what's happening in FANG companies right now. This is the big like, oh, these are the gleaming companies that should have been around, that are saving the workers. All of them have done a 180 and are now absolutely going after their workers to the 10th degree to make sure that they get as much profits as they can at that current second of time that they can. They don't give a crap at all about anything else. And they're showing it in every possible way that they could show with, again, the reneging of contracts and all that stuff. So we're at this point in time where what you're saying right now rings even truer than it was maybe a couple years ago. And I can only see it getting more weird and potentially much worse with the introduction of AI.
AI is going to be like a bit of a monkey wrench into the system. Like it's a mystery. Its role has not been figured out. I know I've mentioned it several times. I mentioned it on the Scrim Town Hall. I mentioned it on this episode, on this show, excuse me, that the AI really is a big question mark, because it's still being pioneered, right? It's like, how useful is this thing going to be? Is it going to get more useful, less useful? Is it going to be good for this, bad? Or is regulation going to come down? There's so many questions when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to AI stuff. So like it is a question, and you're 100% right. Like, I mean, workers are getting treated poorly. Now, the thing is that I do want to like give a shout out to companies that don't do this. Obviously, not everybody does this. A lot of startups are just like, nah, man, just like do your thing, and like it's more human, right? I know some people that are in the trades, and like they're doing fantastic. I know people in the trades that have quite literally been like, you know what, like I was getting really stressed out at work because I wasn't getting enough hours, and my boss was like, you know what, man, I'm just going to put you on salary because it's not your fault that we work outside and it's raining, and I'm still going to get paid the same amount for the job. And it's like, that's a good boss. That's a good boss, and they care about their employees, and like that makes sense. It's like, yeah, like this person's worrying about like making their money and making sure they hit those hours, and it's like, don't worry about the hours anymore. I'm going to pay you the same amount. Things like that, right? Like that's just one example, but there are a lot of companies out there that do the right thing. But it's also really funny, Mike, that you mentioned the CEO so much, because if you notice something, we haven't actually talked about the topic of the episode yet, which is burnout. And one of the big things in this sort of documentary was the CEO. So I'll get into that right now. I mean, this documentary was broken up into multiple sections. It kind of like, flip back and forth, and it was talking to different doctors and all kinds of different things, right? But I don't want to specifically talk about burnout right now. I'm mentioning it now just kind of as a quick like little check-in, kind of like a checkpoint to remind you, like, I'm not just complaining on this episode. We are going to have a discussion at the end about this. But this documentary broke down the different areas that they investigated about burnout into 6 different topics, which is the CEO, jargon, the human machine, the manager, education, and empty promises. And then again, Mike and I will have a discussion at the end. So the very first one, like I mentioned, it's funny that Mike mentioned the CEO so much, because the CEO is the very first of the 6 that I want to talk about today. He is, she is, or whomever is the star of the show. They give the monologue of the company, but their speeches are typically rooted in fiction and are not even close to what will actually happen. How many times have you had a town hall, which we've already mentioned? CEO goes up there and it's like, HTML, all the things, is in a good market position for rapid growth during this time of enter in it's like all just like Charlie Brown, like wah 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 wah, like it's just nonsense. It's like, we are virtually in the greatest position ever for shareholder value. Our human capital is stronger than ever before, and we will nonsense, right? Now here's the thing. Their salaries keep increasing. Now, this is not an eat the rich episode, but here's the thing that's kind of weird. Their salaries keep increasing, but the CEOs, I don't feel like they're getting better. Since 1978, CEO salaries, as of the documentary, grew 1,322%. Workers in the same time, 18%. Now, again, this is not an eat the rich episode. However, here's a question, or here's a little fact. Elop, which was the CEO of Nokia, under his leadership, he lost 4.9 billion, that's with a B, billion euros. He lost the company 4.9 billion euros. And he had an exit bonus of 19 million euro. His exit bonus was 19 million euro. Right? Like, this is like, what's going on here, right? Now, these are monetary failures that are measured, right? We could talk about it. We could say this person lost that, this person made that, this person did this. And I'm not saying Elop is like this terrible person. I literally saw his name attached to this statistic. I don't know anything else about him. I just have this statistic from the actual documentary. But I mean, we've seen this tale in the news before. we've seen constantly things come up where it's like that CEO made this much and that CEO made this much, but their company was failing and they had to lay these people off and this and that and whatever. And then you have the other side of the argument where it's like, well, it's not in the company's best interest to keep people around if they don't need them. It's not up to their responsibility to employ people. It's a big freaking mess. That's why this is not an Eat the Rich episode. However, those monetary failures are measured. I already mentioned that. But what isn't measured is the human cost of these failures. So Mike already mentioned that there's company reorganizations, and this is going to potentially come up a couple times in this episode. But when there's a big failure, it's like, oh no, what are we going to do? CEOs and all the administration, they say we're going to reorganize the company, right? And this not only is usually disruptive and doesn't usually help too much, but it also ignores the fact that now there's unhappiness among the employees. A lot of that stuff, a lot of the unhappiness goes largely unspoken. I mean, how many people in the office are talking to you about their burnout? It's kind of like, dude, like we're busy. Like, what are you talking about? You're burnt out. We got stuff to do here, right? And it's an issue because if you think about it, it's like you work at, doesn't matter, Nokia, you work at, enter in company here, whatever it is, whatever company it is. And you decide, I'm going to work here. And I hope I do a good job and I hope the company does well. And then, a couple quarters go by and then that next quarter, boom, the company loses a whole bunch of money. I mean, are you going to be super happy about that? I mean, you might be neutral, might be like, I'll get another job, but many people are going to be unhappy about that. They're going to be like, oh my God, like, what do I do? Maybe because they realize that a disruptive company reorganization may come. Maybe because they realize that they may get cut, they may get laid off, but they also might literally be sad. They may literally love the company. They may want to make the company successful, and then the company's not doing well. And they realize, well, I'm just an accountant. I'm just an engineer. I'm just a enter and roll here. I'm not the person that is running the show. I can't help this. Like, how can I help this titan of a corporation, assuming it's a large company? How can I help this corporation do amazingly? And yes, there are examples of, one person making, amazing strides and doing all this crazy stuff and, like really making a difference in the world. I understand that, but that's not what these people are often thinking of in this kind of time. It's sort of like, oh my God, this company I'm working at is failing. What do I do? And it's not good. Now it doesn't stop here. But, oh, Mike, did you have a comment on the CEO?
Yeah, like the CEO one is really interesting to me because I've been following it loosely over the years because it's always really interesting to see these CEOs get these massive golden handcuff packages where essentially the company fails and they still make 20, 30, 40 million dollars. And what I've learned over the years is that the more a company fails and the more layoffs that are done, it seems the higher the CEO's compensation exit is. And for the most part, this is maybe a conspiracy theory, and this is a very conspiracy theory episode, so it fits here. But for the most part, from what I'm seeing, is it's because of the fact that you just mentioned Elop's name as the failure here. And so he's going to be tied to this failure. Whereas most likely the case is that although he was probably a very significant part of the failure, most of it was probably driven by the board of directors and the shareholders, where the pressure was to put it into different strategic posts. Elop tried to put them into those strategic positions. Those were the wrong calls. Elop has to take the blame for it. And that's why he gets that $19 million euro bonus, essentially, when he exits, because you did not mention the board of directors right there. And so like every podcast, every documentary moving forward will mention Elop. So he's got that reputational hit, whereas the board of directors is clean, free, and can move on to whatever other project that they have. A lot of times the board of directors has a lot of power in these situations, and they do their best to stay out of the spotlight of a failure.
It's like the decisions by committee, like the board of directors and such would be that committee. And to be fair, like, I don't know what happened with Elop and Nokia. Like, again, like, you're 100% right. I grabbed this fact from a documentary. It didn't elaborate. I'm just, I'm kind of covering the documentary with this episode. And the only name we have associated with that bad press is Elop. So you're right. Like, I don't know if he's a good, bad person. I have no idea. Was he in a good, bad situation? Did he make a bunch of mistakes? I don't know. But it is like a big thing that people will look at, right? Where it's like, hey, the CEO is the star of the show and they lost all this under their leadership. What the heck's going on here? And it's weird too, because when you think about it, it's like the CEO when the company's really small, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. The CEO is still kind of the star of the show, but it's different, especially when it's a private company. There's no shareholders to really help unless there's private investors, things like that. It's very much like a different situation where like many of the workers, if not all the workers, could actually go talk to the CEO. Whereas when you're in a big corporation, it's like the CEO is almost like a famous figure. And it's kind of like, oh my God, this person is like the CEO is in our office, like in our specific building. What are we gonna do? And it's almost like a bit of stardom or something like that. It's a weird like worker CEO relationship almost, depending on the size of the company. This next one's a little weird. I'm just gonna say it. I was thinking about not covering it, and then I decided to do it because it's freaking weird. So jargon. Now jargon, that's not the part that's weird. How it came to be is a little weird. So back in the late 1980s, Pacific Bell became interested in a new program for their employees. They spent about $30 million on a consciousness raising program based on the teachings of a Russian mystic slash philosopher who roamed the Middle East and Asia searching for the meaning of life. The program was officially called Leadership Development, but it was nicknamed Krone, Krone, after Carmel Krone, the consultant that developed much of the training material. Now, he was obviously influenced by that Russian mystic, like I said. And the idea of this program was to broaden the perception and increase sensory input of the employees. Now, this is already getting kind of weird. Now, I'm not going to get into like, all the stuff. You can find some stuff online about it, including an investigation into, hey, why is Pacific Bell spending money on something like this? However, we're talking about jargon. And much of the language used in this program has become the backbone of a lot of corporate jargon that we use today. Things like touch base, close the loop, thought leader, going forward, low hanging fruit. And there are many, many more of these things. Now you might be like, well, like that's pretty weird, but it's just how we talk. But this little part of the documentary kind of hit home with me. A lot of these bits of jargon, of which there are many more than I just listed, give people substance. People need to have substance to their work. And jargon like this helps them add substance to empty tasks. Obviously, they can be used with tasks that literally have substance as well. If you're the person that's quite literally making the product, obviously you're physically making a physical product. That's a bit different. But if you use this, like you're using the same language as the person that is like that, the person who has an empty task and the person who has a full task, if you will, using the same jargon, it's like you're adding that bit of substance. It's like, oh, I'm a thought leader. Moving forward, we're going to do this. This is the low hanging fruit, and we're going to do that. Like just that, like high pitched, sort of like happy go lucky fake voice, like rings out in my head. It's the very first thing my mind goes to when I hear about stuff like this. I mean, the whole mind consciousness raising program thing is kind of crazy. Like, go ahead and look it up. I think a lot of it's copywritten. I remember reading something about that too, where like a lot of the stuff that happened in this program like wasn't divulged because it wasn't supposed to be. Kind of weird. Like kind of like what are we doing here? I can only imagine sitting in a cubicle one day and they're like, hey Matt, you got to go to this thing, this like meeting. And it's like, what is it? It's like going to help your sensory, you can increase your sensory input and perception. It's like, dude, I'm trying to make a slider, trying to make a nav bar here. It's like, no, you're coming over here. Close the loop, Matt. Become a thought leader. Going forward, you're gonna kill the low hanging fruit, and then we'll touch base later.
Wow, you just put all of the jargon into one phrase, into one sentence. I mean, I've definitely used a lot of that jargon, but I've also not, like, I don't think I've ever in my entire career used the word thought leader. I don't see myself ever, like, slipping that in, being like, hey, you need to be a thought leader on this task to put a button on the page. Like, you're the thought leader of this assignment.
You're the thought leader, Mike. You're the thought leader, just saying.
I've definitely said touch base before. I'm not realizing that it was part of this weird jargon. Don't really understand how, but sure. And then obviously going forward is something that I've said before. Weird. This is a weird one.
It's like, again, it was like I was something I was going to leave out, and I wanted to talk about the jargon, but I was like, man, we're kind of going and talking about like CIA stuff and all this stuff in this episode. So I kind of figured it was an appropriate ad, and it just kind of makes me scared almost. It makes me kind of scared of what we've become. Because I've absolutely heard the term thought leader. Like, I don't know how much I've used it, but I totally say things like touch base, close the loop, moving forward, all kinds of things. There's a bunch of other ones, like I said. Now we're going to touch on a little bit of, I'm going to become a little more dystopian here, and this is the human machine. So what's this? Just as machines are made to be more efficient over time, corporations look at people as machines. They take a look at people and think, those are different cogs. Each person is a cog in the machine, and each cog could be made more efficient, right? By the 1970s, a corporation really wasn't treated as a corporation or a company with people in it. Corporation became a way to maximize shareholder value. And so corporations would start using phrases like, how much human capital have we got? Instead of addressing the quote unquote human capital as people. So it's a bit of like a mind change. It's a bit of a perception change when you start looking at this corporation is this big skyscraper, and every floor has this many offices in it, and each of those has this many offices and this many cubicles, and each one of those spaces is filled with a person. That person is a cog. That cog can be made more efficient by doing what? Well, maybe by taking a conscious raising program based on a Russian mystic, or, all these crazy things that you think like, what's going on here? Like, I'm just trying to make websites. I'm just trying to run my business, and I'm just trying to like, do my taxes or do whatever. And it's kind of like, no, like you are seen as part of the business that can add to shareholder value. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do. That's what the corporations are trying to do. They want to maximize the shareholder value. They want to make analysts happy. It's kind of a weird perception change, a little dystopian. Enter the manager, our next topic here. Many managers are promoted into their position because they've been around the company for a long time. A lot of seniority, right? Maybe they've been a great individual contributor. Maybe it's like that person, just used to crush spreadsheets. Like, just give us the output. Like, it was crazy. That web developer used to make pages like nothing. He used to make sliders and nav bars and have animations and everything. And he would, put it out and it would be perfect within a couple of weeks. It was crazy. So you think, okay, let's promote them to a manager. What if I said, this is why so many managers are not good at being managers? Think about it this way. Companies are taking people out of jobs that they're good at. So they've been there a long time. They must be good at it or competent enough that they haven't been fired. Or they're, like I said, a great individual contributor. And so they're literally good at their job. And they say, okay, you want to move up a level? No problem. We're going to take you out of what you're doing. We're going to give you a pay raise. And then we're going to move you into a new job. We're going to move you into a management position. These are the traits, the seniority and the individual contributor these are not necessarily traits of a good manager. Like, good managers are like a human interface. They talk to the people. They understand what's going on. They have they have a conversation with their employees, with their colleagues. They have that human connection. And many managers, because they're good workers, don't even really see managing as managing a team of people. They are totally kind of zoomed in and focused on the work. They aren't really focused on the managing angle. They're just worried about the task at hand. And this is where some managers can feel like they're kind of like, man, that guy, like, you can't hold a conversation with that guy. Like, that, what's that guy doing over there? He's always, nose in his book, nose in his laptop, working away. But, I have an HR problem, or I have a problem where like my kid's sick or something. And it's kind of crazy to get a response of like, your kid's sick, didn't ask about that, deadline tomorrow. Some people who are very, very, very focused on the task at hand, who are worried about their individual output, would manage like that. And so now we have another thing that's kind of adding to this weird corporate culture we have, because the manager may not be good at managing, and many managers are promoted into a management position when they're not necessarily good at it.
And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that there's not enough paths for employee to get to a point where they're being paid more. So they top out at their individual like IC position, individual contributor position. And then the natural next step, as we've been taught, is management. But the reality is that management is only like really suited for probably like 1% of the employees that get to that point. But because they want to make more money, they don't see another choice. And so now they're removing themselves from individual contribution, taking themselves out of the ability to contribute to the company, putting themselves in management because they want to make more money, but then are also finding out that they're bad at that role. And the company has to then either adjust or just continue to pay them because they put a lot of effort into the company. And now you have bad managers that then lead to bad individual contributors because everyone's kind of jaded. So it's a really bad slope to go down. I don't know if this has been fixed in all industries, but I know like in tech, a lot of times there will be like this level up for an engineer that you can go from like, junior, mid-level, senior, and then you can jump from senior to something like principal rather than go to manager. And then principal as an engineer is like an architect where you oversee a large swath of systems. And instead of managing people, you're managing code. So that's like a more natural path in the development sphere where you don't have to be a manager. And I think that was a smart move. And I think potentially other industries might have already adapted something like that or should, where you have an opportunity for a really, really, really good individual contributor to level up their salary by contributing even more to your company rather than just turning them into a manager that potentially could like for not only kill their own individual contribution, but kill other individual contributors.
You know, I like that you brought up the fact that like there are improvements coming down the pipe, or like have already been implemented in many industries, or specifically in the tech industry and many companies, because you're absolutely right. And I mean, honestly, like I was kind of always taught, as many of us were, that hey, you're going to be working in IT or tech or this or that, and then you're eventually going to go to management. The thing with me though is, I mean, I think about management sometimes, and I don't even think about the work anymore. So like right now, I'm making websites for people. Makes sense. That's what I do. However, I don't really think about it. Like what if I think about my manager position and being like, okay, Matt, you're now a manager. I immediately think, okay, I'm going to drop the IDE and I'm going to start doing things more like planning and talking to maybe project managers and being more like that, and being an interface to maybe HR, being the human interface to the team. That's immediately what I think of. And it's what I've always thought of when I think of management. Whereas I know a lot of other people are like, well, you still got to get your work done. You got to do this. And they're still trying to micromanage it. And it's like, hey, sometimes you need a micromanagement. Sure. Sometimes if something needs to be intricately, very specifically navigated, fine. But that's a rare occurrence, doesn't always need to happen. And often you can hand that micromanaging off to maybe a senior member of your team where it's like, yo, this has to be done very specifically, kind of thing. Because to me, it's like the manager has always been sort of a more human job. It's like you have to have that conversation with them. And having the tech background, because you came from tech, allows you to have that conversation with somebody. Or if they're like, this particular challenge I'm facing is more of a technical one, I may not know that because maybe I've been a manager for a number of years, but I can still have that conversation with them. I can hold the conversation with them and be like, back in my day, we did this. Maybe that can apply to you. Like that's a very human way to talk to somebody. Whereas it's way less human to be more like get your work done. What's our ticket? Like that's a classic one in IT. Like what's your ticket close rate? All we care about is our ticket close rate. Make sure those timesheets don't have any overtime. Like, well, you're just worrying about pleasing the next level up. You're not really talking to people and being like, why are the timesheets out of whack? And as a closing note on the manager, like I get it. Like the manager is just a manager. They're not the senior director, the director, the vice president, the CEO. So there's going to be pressures from above that cause them to do things. I get it. Still sucks. Still contributes to burnout. Much like our education. So this was something interesting in the documentary that I thought to throw in here. It's about our education system. So this is talking like our system is really, and this is going to sound really bad, but it's really designed to destroy the natural curiosity we have as children. Children are kind of like, oh, like what's that? What's this button? What's this? Can I break this? It's kind of like, well, don't do that. Shut up. Get ready for work. Really, like our education system really kind of like deadens children to that norm. And if you kind of think about the structure of a day in the classroom, it's a little bit weird. So many structures of our primary education are designed to prepare people for factory labor. Bells are ringing, you go room to room, you change tasks, things like that. And it's like, you don't need all that. Like, you don't need to have bells ringing and like different, like weird things like that. So you might be like, well, why don't they change that? Well, since people aren't making their living doing manufacturing jobs as much anymore, different per jurisdiction, of course, the school system's kind of preparing us for a life that really kind of doesn't make much sense, if that makes sense. They're teaching us don't ask questions. Don't ask questions about things. For example, don't ask this question. Why would you write a report? Like, why would I write this report if no one's going to read it? Don't say that. Manager said to do, you do. That's what you do. That's it. Right? Play along. If someone is acting like they have authority and they do indeed have authority over you, you play along. Oh, yes, manager. Oh, yes, director. The stock price is quite impressive today. Meanwhile, it's down 30% from last year, but it's up 5% from yesterday. Right? So you play along. It's kind of like the teacher is the authority here. The various teachers are the authority here. The principal is the authority here. And it's teaching us to be like, sit down at your desk, shut up, do what I tell you, go home. A little bit depressing, a little messed up. I kind of think it's accurate, to be honest. Like, it is accurate. Like, how many people in your classrooms, like as kids, got in trouble for being like too loud or too like funny or too goofy? It's like, no, stop being goofy, stop being happy, shut up. We got to fill this paperwork out. Good. 6 out of 10. Garbage. Next. That's what we do in school. Like, how many like swaths of paperwork from school have I thrown out? I mean, a lot. That's a lot of work. Now, I'm not saying education's bad, and I understand, we do need to have education, and it's a broad system that's for many people. So how do you solve it? I don't know. But this is an interesting observation by this documentary that was made. That's why I wanted to bring it up. The very last thing here before we kind of get into the debate, big episode, but we knew this going into it. Empty promises. We heard this a million times. Do well at school, go to post-secondary, get a job, get a house, live a prosperous life. Millennials are 40% poorer than their parents or grandparents at the exact same age. I mean, Mike and I have had several conversations about buying houses, buying property, buying places. It's difficult. It's not easy. They really kind of have to have two incomes, and not just two incomes from McDonald's. I'm talking some serious income. You have to have some serious wealth management, some serious sacrifice. It's a lot of nonsense and everything else. And all of this is a mess. You throw in stuff like student loans in there and other things that you may have leveraged in order to get to this quote unquote prosperous life that you now are struggling to get toward. And it is a mess. Now, I always struggle to like mention this stuff because it's kind of like, I always feel like I'm whining a bit, but like, you're right. Like there is a lot of not like, they're right, rather, the people mentioning the statistics and stuff, because there is a lot of stuff against us. Like, I would say that we're doing, like Mike and I are doing pretty good on the scale of like what the school told us to do. Go to primary school, go to secondary school, go to post-secondary, which is private school, like a college or university, get a job, and then, get a place to live a prosperous life. It's like, oh, hang on, hold up. Getting a job, not easy. Getting a house, very not easy here in Canada. Prosperous, the house kind of took that away. The low wages kind of took that away. Now it's kind of like, yeah, but remember, you got that debt payment. It's like, whoa, hold up. I went into debt to get this prosperous thing. What do? You got people working 2-3 jobs, not good. Going to revisit something right now too. CEOs do things that are supposed to benefit the company, or they're supposed to do that, right? You think, they're the leader. They're going to do a bunch of stuff, but they kind of sometimes don't. 60% of reorganization programs improve nothing. These programs, however, impress analysts, which report on it, cause the stock to go up, and the shareholders get value. Some analyst looks at it and goes, "Oh my God, this reorganization plan is amazing. There's no managers. There's an open concept office. We got this. We got this, boys. Everyone invest in this company." And now the CEO has just done their job, but they've done a disservice to the actual company because either nothing's changed at all, or maybe even some things have been disrupted. And now the actual product that we're making to sell is lesser in some way. Workers are being given a massive workload and not enough resources to handle it. When you're first hired, it's like, hey, get in here, welcome to the family, double kiss on the cheeks. You're in the mafia now. No, you're at the company now. You've been hired, right? It's like, man, this place is going to be awesome. by the way, you got 10 hours of work and 8 hours to do it. Don't go over those, don't go over those 10 hours. Thanks a lot for your service. And the manager's gone. It's like, wait, hold up. What's that? Empty promise. Not good. Another thing too, when you're doing those tasks and you're working away, those 10 tasks, how exactly are you doing it? Do you have any autonomy? Do you have any control? Do you have any of your signature on there? A lot of the time you don't. You're told how to do a task, when to do it, when to sit up, when to this, when to that, when to this, all that. Have no autonomy. You have no control. And so like your human like reward system's messed up because it's kind of like I know that this form is inefficient. Like we should have 2 fields instead of 8. But like I'd have to go all the way up the chain and talk to the committee of people and the manager and is your big contribution to life that you got a form from 8 fields down to 2? Like it messes with you, right? Like it starts becoming like, what are we doing here? But what about the reward? You're thinking, well, yeah, people are getting paid. Salary is not as high up on the reward kind of tier system, if there is one, as you think. Social recognition and feeling appreciated is one of the 2 top things. You fill out that form amazingly. You hand it in. Did you get any social recognition for the job? Probably not. Do you feel appreciated? Well, the system, like you submitted it to an online system, it gave you a check mark and there's your dopamine for the day, I guess. Like sometimes, you really don't feel appreciated in jobs. And like some jobs do a good job doing that. But I mean, your coworkers and stuff aren't going to be like, good job on filing form 14720.A and filling out section J, II, subsection A1. It's like, what are we doing here? So you think, okay, the reward system's a little messed up, but the salary's got to be good, right? Now, is it? We just mentioned prosperous life being interrupted by a bunch of economic problems. The houses are expensive, the wages are low, this and that. I mean, here in Canada, there's the whole tariff thing. Let's not get into that. However, Bank of Canada was just sort of like, well, if the tariffs get put in place, our wages are going to go down. That's the response we got from the Bank of Canada. The wages are going to go down. It's like, can we do something that's not, Like, oh, okay. So we're already struggling. We'll just do less, I guess. Like, what type of response is that from an authoritative figure? So now the reward, monetarily speaking, is also on shaky ground, right? Not good. What about the new thing? Mike mentioned AI. Just a few years ago, it wasn't AI, it was robots. Robots are going to take your jobs away. They're going to take that job away. You better do a good job. They're going to take that job away. Well, I mean, if they took the job away, then people would have more time off. Maybe we would get more creative peoples and we would discover things. No. Wouldn't it be really bad if people had time off to go home? Because the thing is, they're not going to know what to do with themselves. They have to be filling out form 24781. What's going to happen to section J, subsection I, subsection III, A1? What's going to happen? It's not going to get filled out. It's not going to get filled out, Mark. Not going to get filled out. I don't know why I said Mark. It's just like the very first like manager name I could think of. I've never even had a manager named Mark. A little weird, little tidbit. Anyway, last thing. Trying to achieve societal norms. You want to buy a house, you need a lot of money. Do you think, okay, I want that house. Everyone's saying I need to buy a house, I need to buy a house, I need to buy a house. Okay, I'm going to go do that. Societal norm. A lot of money, but I got to do a lot of work. You work really hard. You work really long hours. You barely afford it. Realistically, you kind of can't afford it. Then what? Oh no, I'm behind on my societal norms. I'm starting to panic. I'm starting to be like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm going to look like an idiot. I got to work more. I got to put more work in. I got to fill in more subsection III, A1. I got to do that better. I got to show my family. And I don't know what okay, great. You do that. And now you realize, hang on, I'm spending so much time at the office. I can't even go. I'm not even at home. I've had that conversation with some friends where they're like workaholics. I'm like, why'd you buy a house? It's like, well, it's an investment and this and that. Why'd you buy a house? Live cheap. Go to the office every day. Stay there for your 15 hours. And invest all the money or do whatever. Like talk to a money manager. Like get some professional investment advice. I don't know if buying a house is the way to do it. Cause like what happens if there's something wrong with the electricity or the plumbing or the roof one day? You're going to get to the office. You're going to miss out on that 15 hours, man. What's going to happen, right? So the workaholics, like it just doesn't make sense. So empty promises, not good. All of this to say, we've covered the 6 topics. All of this to say, burnout. Burnout is something that's like serious. And in the documentary, they cover it and they even talk about the early days when it wasn't just called burnout. It was called some other things. there's a dehumanization something and all this. Like they were kind of trying to like figure it out. And they landed on burnout. What is burnout? Well, it can come in various forms, but many people describe it as a wave of exhaustion at a level that they've never experienced before. And it can happen to you because of one or several of the different issues that arise at work, maybe things arise in your personal life. And many of these reasons are actually already been described, specifically on the professional side of things. I've already described those 6 kind of areas. So I have some blind questions for Mike. And I actually discussed some of these with my girlfriend recently. We're going to get a little personal here. No, we're not going to give out any sort of like personal information. But I was telling Mike, these are blind questions. He hasn't seen these. I have not put these in the show notes at all. It's intentional. Because I had this conversation with my girlfriend and it got kind of dark. But it's not trying to be dark, but it got kind of dark. This is a kind of a long question, Mike. So I'm going to read it. It's kind of like a 2-parter. Maybe we can divide it up or whatever. If you don't want to answer any of these, please also let me know. I'm not going to be like, Mike, social insurance number, buddy. Social insurance number. Give us the ticket. Give us the numbers. No, we're not going to do that.
67A4.
Wait, no, you put it in the wrong field, Mike. It's for section 2. Subsection A for the subsection III, unless II is filled in, then you do IV. Okay, first question here. You have a new daughter. What do you tell her about her future? Will you encourage her to live out her dreams, or should she get a job in a statistically high-paying position that is stable?
Okay, that's the question.
That's the question. That's the first. I got a bunch.
Yeah. So this is a good one because I think about this a lot. Essentially, what I'm trying to do right now is set her up so that she can focus on the things that she wants to focus on in terms of like creativity, if she wants to do something creative, sure, and have the ability to fail. So I want her to have the ability to screw up and go down multiple paths until she finds something that has a cross section between something that she's interested in and something that makes her money. Now, to do that, I need to work a lot and I need to make a lot of money to have a backup system and stuff like that. So that's the goal right now. That's the short-term / long-term goal, to make sure that she has that ability, because I don't know with the way that the world is going, what the job market is going to look like. I can't predict it. There's no way to say that, hey, maybe she should go into development, like software development. Like that probably isn't going to be the case by the time that she gets out of high school. Like she's almost like she's a little bit over 1.5 years old right now. So this is a long ways away for me. No way to predict what's going to happen at the time that she's going to be graduating university or whatever. So I just need to make sure right now that we can put her in a position where she can fail.
So like you do acknowledge that like things may be messed up, like obviously by AI and stuff like that. But like, even if the job market stays the same miraculously to what it is today, even with AI and whatever state of the world, you like acknowledge that like, hey, or rather you're putting the work in because you acknowledge that this is like her future could be really messed up, like not good, like just kind of like the picture in my head is like a factory worker, but that's not what it's going to be. It's just going to be like that person that's filling in forms, stamping forms that mean nothing kind of thing. So you're trying to like, you're putting in the work so that to insulate her from that a bit.
So I don't see that being the future personally. I think the future is more likely to be just more dystopian in the sense that people can't even get those jobs, and people would love to get that job of a factory worker or a person that's filling in forms, and they can't because of automation and AI. And then also on top of that, we don't have a government in place that is able to like pivot to the point where like it'll help their citizens when there's no jobs to be got. So now that's my dystopian, like worst case scenario view, is that happens. And then what will happen then is I probably even more dystopian thought of like more anarchy type stuff where people will start to revolt a little bit. And so that's a violent kind of outcome. Ironically, I see that happening more likely than what you're describing of the job market just remaining the same and people going into an office job and filling out forms, which is kind of scary to think about. Like maybe I didn't even think about that until we started talking about this. And I don't know how to defend against that, really. Obviously, money helps in the sense that you just hire a security force or something. But Yeah, that's the worst case scenario.
Even think about
Realistically,
that,
it'll
to be honest. Like, I'm just thinking that we're
yeah,
just like slowly being turned into like drones. We're the cogs in the machine,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I'm seeing that as the opposite of like us being pushed out as the drones and to make room for the free workers of AI, and then us being forgotten, like the regular workers being forgotten and pushed aside by the work like the ruling class, because that's where we're at right now a little bit, and that trend kind of continuing. So that like again, I think that's worst case scenario. That's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be something in between where something has to adjust and we have just a harder way to live, but like there are programs in place that allow you to live. And anyway, I think there's going to be it's going to be harder for people to find that cross section between finding a good job that they like and one that pays the bills. And that's why, again, I'm saying that I want her to be able to fail multiple times in multiple areas and still find a path to success. And again, success for me is like finding something that's rewarding to do, that pays the bills and makes her independent.
Yeah, so you're not trying to like set her up for a whole life, but you're trying to like allow her to be like, hey, don't go into that drone line. Let's try
Correct.
some other stuff. Unless I guess she wants
Yes.
to be a drone for some reason,
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
but okay. It's okay. So this next question I have then we kind of semi discussed it, but I'll mention it. I'll ask the question, then I'll mention what I said to my girlfriend. This is what we were discussing. And I asked her, I said, "Are dreams dangerous?" So my girlfriend is a like some background information. She works with kids, and I was like, "Do you think that you should encourage kids to do what they want to do?" And like, all this stuff that we were taught growing up. Do you think that it makes more sense to be like, "Hey, man, you can do whatever you want, and like, figure out what exactly you want or whatever." But then I think about those days, and I think about how many people do I know that are actually doing what they wanted? Like maybe they never found what they wanted or whatever. And I kind of find that dreams are dangerous. So that's the question. Are dreams dangerous? And so my response to her was the way that it is here in Canada right now, we're in this weird phase right now where like it's difficult to like afford a place to live. It's difficult to like become prosperous and things like that. And I'm not, and when I say difficult, I don't mean like difficult as in like I want it handed to me. That's not what I'm asking for. It's like if I go and put in, 8, 10, 12-hour days, like generally speaking, you would expect, at least from what we were shown in the school system, that you would be rewarded with at the very least like a modest high life, like upper middle class, maybe middle class, something like that. And I was telling her that I think that dreams, especially for children, are dangerous because it makes them think that they can do whatever it is they put their mind to. However, many of them are just going to be put into jobs that are very soul sucking. It isn't what they wanted. They fell short of what they wanted, things like that. And I said, wouldn't a kid having grown up and stuff be better off? And I don't know the answer to this. But wouldn't a kid be better off with someone having done the research and been like, you know what? Canada really needs plumbers. Plumbers is the next biggest thing. Plumbers get paid really good job security, whatever the job market appears to be. Teach that kid to be a plumber and tell that kid's going to be a plumber. And then they, at the very least, maybe they won't really like it, but they may tolerate it because they've been told it their whole life. And you're doing that rather than us being like in a job that we hate and being like, man, I could have had those dreams. Should we dash them right away? Like, should we say, is that more dangerous to have the dreams? Is it more like, no, sit down and be quiet, kind of thing? Sit down, be quiet, look at the job market, these 3 jobs, which one? And that's really dystopian. But I did tell her that. I said, like, would you prefer that the kids that you work with, would you prefer for them to be in pursuit of their dreams or be comfortable and in like a house and in like a good position in quote unquote societal norm? And like, I struggle to say that I would tell kids to pursue a dream. I don't know the answer. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an economist, but I sincerely struggle to put that on the table. I think that might be something we shouldn't teach. I kind of think it might be dangerous.
It depends what you mean by dreams. So I'll give my perspective on what they got wrong during our generation. My thought when we were growing up, we were taught that to achieve your dreams, quote unquote, you need to do well in school, go to university, do well in university, and then get a job, right? Like that was the typical path we were taught to do. And then we were also taught on that note that like if you do a trade that's like below the university route, like you shouldn't aim to do a trade. And I think some teachers taught it differently and some teachers tried to push the trades a little bit more. But for instance, my parents, that was their thought process, right? Like, and a lot of people's parents, that was their thought process. Get an education, you're going to be set. I think that aspect of the dream was the wrong approach, because getting a university degree, what it led to is like the proliferation of these massive university programs that do nothing. This might be a little bit not contradictory, but this might be a little bit a spicy take, but like doing like a humanities style program in university because you couldn't get into like the engineering or whatever, or going in and doing geography, like doing the really non-specialized university programs just because you wanted to graduate university. And that was what was pushed to do, in my opinion, was the wrong move by like our parents and by the generations trying to push us to university. I think that misled a lot of kids to thinking that, hey, I'll just do this program, learn a bunch of history, and then I'll be set for life. And like the reality is like it's a very competitive field. Like to become a history professor, that's really, really difficult. A very low percentage will become history professors. And then like your options really, really narrow down after that, where you can become a teacher with that degree, or you have to completely pivot and do something completely out of the realm of your degree, which is the majority of what the people that graduate do from those kinds of degrees. So I think what we should be doing is leveling out the trades and all the different options that are available outside of university, and not saying that, hey, university is the only route to live out your dreams. Like, hey, like you were mentioning plumbing could be fun for a lot of people. And if we don't put it on this like lower pedestal, a lot of kids might go in and try it out. And if we give them more chances to try all of these like, hands-on skills during their during their schooling, they might realize that they like to plumb, they like to be electricians, they like to do whatever and then we show them like, hey, this is what you're going to do if you're going to go down into like the programming world where you're going to sit in a cubicle all day or sit at your computer all day. A lot of kids don't want to do that. And so like that might even it out and might allow more diversity in the sense of like going into different programs without the social pressure, again, like you mentioned, the social pressure of like, hey, you're doing it wrong, or you're doing it the class below or whatever. Like that's the wrong approach. We should have never had that societal pressure, because what that led to is a shortage of trades, obviously, because kids were like, well, I don't want to be a tradesman if people are going to think less of me. It's like, that's dumb. Why would that be the case? It's a completely different skill set, and you can make just as much money as any of the other positions. If you enjoy it, great, do it. So I think teaching, like, it depends, again, it comes back to, it depends on what you're defining as a dream. Like, I think, yes, it's dangerous to say that kids can do anything and be anything. I think that's a little bit of a dangerous play, but I also am of the mindset that like, I want kids to be kids for as long as humanly possible, because as soon as they stop becoming kids, they start to realize the world around them isn't as magical as it was at that time. And that starts to like slowly grind them down, as we've seen with people around us. Like the older you get, the more you like drop the shades of reality, and you're like, oh shit, like this, this part of life is weird. This part of life is dumb. This part, like, I want that to be as pushed back as possible. So I don't want to be like, hey, you can't do anything. But if we just shift the way that we teach them, changing the schooling, the education system is, I think, step one, like you were mentioning. I think that's a really important step that we need to consider very, very seriously, is figuring out a better way to teach kids and allow them to learn while also not grinding them into these like weird machines. There's got to be I don't have an answer for it, but there's got to be a way to do it. And then also opening up the avenues of like, hey, these are all the options you have. None of these are better than the others. And you just need to pick one that suits your, again, that cross section that I was talking about before with my daughter, something that interests you and is able to pay the bills.
Yeah, because my definition of the dream for sure is like that very abstract thing that we're taught as like young children, or at least we were taught, which is like do whatever you want, like be an astronaut, be this, be that, be this, be that. But then you're right, like you do get into like the high school where it's like choose what you want to do, but it better be university. Have you heard of university? Have you heard of if you don't make it university, you're gonna go to college? And then if you go to college,
Yeah.
you miss college, you're gonna go to be a plumber or like a carpenter? Like, what's that about? And it wasn't said like that, but it was definitely presented like that. It was sort of like level 1, 2, 3, and you want to be on level 1. Level 1 is where it's great. And you can see that people don't like it because how many people do we know, at least I know a bunch, that have gone to university and they're not academics themselves. They just kind of did it because they were kind of told to. And they either drop out or they don't do as well or they don't end up doing the job that they're trained to do from the university. They end up doing like something else completely. I know some people that have gone literally from lawyers to plumbers, like quite literally,
Yep.
just being like, this is
Mhm.
awful. Like, I do not want to be pushing these papers. And this leads me actually to like something else that I wanted to mention. So I'll just mention it now is like one thing that it's a phrase that like I don't know whether I got it from someplace or whether I don't think I invented it, but it's something that's in my head. I don't know where I got it from. And I always think of the phrase death by domestication. And I don't mean literally death. I mean, like, kinda like draining us, like you mentioned, where it's like, once the kid starts realizing, like, the world's like this, and you have to do all this work, and it's really difficult, and it's this, and it's that, and everything, and they start realizing the world, like I mentioned in the education system, they kinda get, like, deadened a bit, right? Where it's kinda like, "Hey, you, shut up, do this. If you don't do a good job if you don't do a good grade, you're gonna get in trouble, like, that's it. It's gonna be on your permanent record, kid, like, get it, get going." And so I guess my comment is about like sort of like you know how there's like that stereotype of parents where the parent will be like they have a kid goes to school, whatever it is, all this stuff, and then they get like an office job somewhere, like a respectable, decent job doing insurance. I don't know, something insurance, sure, it's like kind of a standard corporate job, and that kid is like just miserable, and so they say, you know what, I'm leaving this job, and the parents like, no, 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 like it's almost like a like I don't want you to leave that job. That's crazy, right? You have a good job, you have a good career path, you have this and my question is it's like, is that another societal pressure that's like pushing us toward death, toward domestication? And what I mean by that is it's almost like the parent is worried about worrying. They're too, they don't want to worry about the kid not being successful. So like you as like a new father, like that is something that I want to bring up is that like, would you ever push that? And so I'll give an example. Is it something like, okay, let's just say your daughter goes and it becomes an insurance salesperson, comes to you one day, says, I hate this, 30 years old, I hate this, I want to quit. Typical, stereotypical thing is like, oh my God, don't do that, no matter what. What the heck are you doing? That's ridiculous. Don't quit that job. That's a good job, good paying job. You can become a manager in 5 years. You have benefits, you have all these things, you have what society has told you to do. Like, don't do that. And it's sort of like, what is your take on that situation? Like, how would you handle that? Because I feel like a lot of people, actually, no, I don't feel like, I know a lot of people that get pushed into stuff like that, where it's like their parents are like, that's crazy to like do this. Like, just shut up and be a drone. Shut up and be a drone, head down. Don't ruffle any feathers. And sometimes they literally say that, hey, shut up. Just go to work. Shut up. Oh, okay. And then it's like, man, why is my kid depressed? Like, well,
Yeah. I'll say what I hope that I'll be able to do because it's so far away from me right now that I could be a completely different person essentially by then.
sure.
But like my hope of what I would be able to do is allow them, if they're 30 years old, to not really like unless they directly ask me for advice, to not really like interject my own views on them. I think that's something that I want to try to maintain is like while they're young, you have to kind of guide them. That's different. But as they get to adulthood, I think it's important to establish that kind of like trust that, hey, I trust that she knows what she's doing. If she's failing consistently, like, yeah, that sucks. But like, 30 years old, she's not going to listen to me anyway. Like if I just randomly interject my own advice, the reality is that probably going to make her do something more anti whatever I say,
Right.
like reverse psychology. If she asked me for advice in that situation, like if she's like, hey, dad, like I need to know, like, should I leave this job? Like, I hate it. Should I leave this job? And like, if she's been there for a while now, I'd be like, yeah, like, you hate it. That's only going to lead to worse. What's the job market like right now? Good, bad, whatever. Like, maybe you start to look for a job. And she's like, well, I need to leave now. And then I'd be like, okay, leave now. If you need money, like, hopefully I can give you the money and then you can look for a job. Like, I'm hoping that that's the case. Like,
Right.
I'm hoping I'm able to do that. That's idealistic, like, but that's, I think, the hope that I'm able to provide that environment where she could come to me for advice, and I'm able to then provide also a support system if she has to leave a job that she hates. But that might not be the case. Like, it's very possible that I might not be that support system, and then she'll have to make that tough decision on her own without a fallback,
Right.
which would be tough.
But you do think that it's important to potentially make that decision. Like, what's your thought on
Yeah.
like just sticking there, being like, no, like shut up.
Yeah,
shut up, kid."
I'm not a fan of sticking there. Yeah, like I'm very much anti like grinding out something you hate just for the sake of grinding out something you hate. It depends on the situation. Like if she has kids at that time, and if they're the only salary, like that's a different story. Obviously, like it's just so many pieces of nuance that come into it,
Right.
and will come into it for her as well. Like when she's thinking about it, but like all of that plays into the decision to stick through a bad job when you have people relying on you. If you have no one relying on you, or if you have other, like a way to fall back on something, yeah, get the hell out of there. That's always going to be my answer. It's just, it changes based on the situation that you're in.
Right. I think they're good answers because I feel like we're a little polar opposite. Like, I don't know if I would tell a kid or like someone to ask me, like, should I grind this out? I immediately want to say no. I immediately want to agree with you, but I would almost feed them both. Like, I'd be like, hey, you have established yourself. You are used to having these benefits. You are used to having this salary. What's your thoughts on that? Like, if that gets taken from you, which is effectively you're rugging it from yourself, are you going to be able to survive? And it's sort of like, well, no. It's like, well, then maybe you're going to have to stick with it. You're going to have to keep stamping those papers in order to like continue doing what you're doing. It's weird. It's not an easy question, I don't think. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are going to be, with us, against us. There's going to be people that are angry, I'm sure, that are like, what are you guys talking about? Like, just go to work and shut up kind of thing. And it's like, I'm not saying, and I think we should maybe even like almost conclude the episode a little bit with that, where it's like, we're not saying we don't want to go to work. Like, I'm doing some work right now that I like. I like building out some cool pages. I'm building out some cool web apps. I'm helping a local company out right now, transition to digital from literally all paper. Well, they had like a 20-year-old site, but they were literally uploading PDFs and images. So it's like, I like doing that stuff. Like, that's cool that I'm able to like take this person and go, hey, let's make this modern. Let's do this. Hey, let's train you up on editing a site. Hey, here's these 5 options, and here's this, and here's that, and I get to like interact with tools and stuff like that. Like, I'm lucky in that respect. There's aspects of our job that I hate. I'm sure you have the same thing. And like, I guess as like kind of a real kind of closing note for myself is, it sounds like I'm really down on the system, and it sounds like I'm really down on the education system. And I'm down on a lot of key aspects of the system and of the education system only because I wanted to do better. So for example, like I've mentioned this in the past where, I mean, Mike, like you were there. One of the things that I hated, and I hate as a concept to this day, we used to do a theory test in college and then a lab test. And the lab test is like, if anything goes wrong, you get 0. It's like, that's freaking stupid. That's a stupid way to teach somebody something. We're dealing with electronics here that some of the parts are 10 cents. And what if one of those parts goes awry? You got 40 minutes to put it together. That's stupid. That doesn't show me that I'm competent putting together a circuit. That's unbelievably stupid. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, why don't you, like, a theory test, okay, fine. Maybe that can be adjusted in some way. But you're just doing a test in the lab because you freaking need a stupid metric to fill, right? And it's like, that like actually angered me back in the day, where I was like, you're stressing out and you're freaking out about this 40-minute thing. Imagine going to work and you're doing the same task, you're in a lab, and something messes up. Is it like, Matt, that op amp died, you're fired? Like, I'm fired? I'm fired because IC broke, this little integrated circuit broke. I'm fired by, that's exactly how I do it. Later, enjoy having no op amps fail from now on because I'm not here. Do you know what I'm trying to say? And it's like, I'm mad about certain little key things. That's one thing. I'm not going to get into the whole rant and everything, but it's like, I'm mad about certain key things. There's certain good things, absolutely, social aspects of school and stuff like that. I still talk to a lot of school friends. I mean, I'm talking to Mike, things like that. Totally. I'm not down on the whole thing, but I am down on pieces of it. And I feel like there's like ways to improve it. And it's just sort of like, but this is how we've always done it. Like, yeah, but don't do it that way anymore. If it doesn't work, don't do it. Stupid. Schools don't like help you. Like if you fail, you fail. And it's like, well, I guess you could try again, but you're gonna be in summer school, get the kind of that stink eye. It's kind of like, man, shouldn't we be buggering stuff up in school? Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you read a student's grade or pass somebody based upon them messing stuff up. But it's like, you should be afraid to fail. And schools make you afraid to fail. Jobs make you afraid to fail. And it's like, this is stupid. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to end my rant there. I could talk forever. I'm sure Mike could as well. It's just like, this is kind of the point of this episode is like, there's like this big bag of stuff. I don't even know what to really describe. Bag of facts that we've like thrown at you. And it like one, multiple, several, meaning a heck of a lot or whatever, can contribute to you having burnout. And like burnout sucks. And so we're kind of almost all in the pursuit of not being burnt out. For better or worse, we live in a weird system. And honestly, I don't know about you, Mike, but like I'd like to get people's thoughts on this. Like this is the first episode we've kind of done in this format where like I did research for like 2 or 3 days, watched the interview or the documentary a couple of times, wrote out notes, wrote the thing out. So like I'm just mentioning my procedure. So like if you like episodes like this, then I can make other episodes like this where there's more statistics, more facts, more of like a personal part at the end, whatever, right? Like let us know what you think in the comments on Spotify, or you can reach out to us on social media, of course. If you want to talk to me directly, you can DM me on Instagram. You can DM Mike on X as well, things like that. I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can find me there. But just, let us know, because it's a bit of a different episode, a bit of a more personal episode. And I'm not, the show is not changing to this format necessarily, but fun to research. And I thought it'd be a cool little thing to try out, and topical too. Very, very topical for today's workers and prospective workers.
Absolutely. I think the big thing you said was like the failure, like being able to allow yourself to fail. That's what I always attribute to kind of the success that I've had, is I've been able to fail and had a safety net. So that's what I want to make sure that people can have, like either people I'm managing or people or my daughter. Like it's just, I think you need to allow yourself to fail. Otherwise you're going to be stuck at like just not wanting to risk anything. And that's the worst thing you could possibly do, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want somebody just like stuck in their ways. You don't want somebody stuck in their ways or forced into, a system or whatever. It's like, hey, kind of spread your wings a little bit. And we already talked about the whole dream thing, so we're not going to get back into it. But I don't know. Our society's got some thinking. Got some thinking to do. I got some thinking to do. And while you're thinking, you can support this show. you can do so on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML all the things. Many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from the Web Hacker on webhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. Magnus from YesWeb via YesWeb.se. Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server. And Stacy Mosteler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And we'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. And just a reminder, Magic Mind gummies, no caffeine. It's the same thing as the Magic Mind shots, but just in gummy form. Resealable bag of 90 gummies. You can go check that out. Get up to 25% off with our affiliate link, magicmind.com/HTMLGM, or you can use our promo code HTML25. If you want to go and claim that offer, please do. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things Podcast. web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show, and we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings, and we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things, and on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.